I still remember that day clearly, as if it had just happened yesterday. It was a late afternoon in Flagstaff, Arizona, where the cold winds from the pine forest seeped through every crevice of the old weathered house. I, Tyler Reed, 32 years old, a pilot for JetBlue, had finally gotten a few days off after those endless flights from New York to Los Angeles, then looping back to Miami. My work schedule was always packed like that, flying nonstop, snatching quick naps on the plane or in hotels, rarely having time to breathe. But this time I decided to fly back to visit my grandmother, the woman who had raised me into the person I am, though with warm memories mixed with loneliness. I took a domestic flight to Phoenix, then rented a car and drove another 2 hours to Flagstaff. The familiar road, lined with towering pines on both sides, stirred a pang in my heart. My grandmother, Eleanor Reed, was 78 years old and lived alone in a small wooden house. My grandfather had passed away early, leaving her with loneliness and memories. I always thought of her whenever I flew through the clouds, wondering if she was healthy, if she was warm enough in the bitter winter, and most importantly, if the money I sent her every month helped her live more comfortably. When I pushed the door open and stepped inside, the smell of damp wood and fireplace smoke rushed over me, familiar to the point of heartache. She was sitting by the fireplace holding an old book, her silver white hair under the dim yellow light. She looked up, her kind eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Tyler, my dear grandson, I didn't expect you to come so suddenly." She stood up slowly but steadily and hugged me tightly. Her hands trembled, but the embrace was still as warm as when I was a child, when she told fairy tales by the fireside. We sat down and I pulled my chair close to hers, holding the cup of hot tea she had brewed. "Grandma, I'm so glad I finally have time to visit you. My flight schedule has been too hectic. I'm sorry for not coming more often. Are you still healthy?" She smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deeper, but her gaze still full of love. "I'm fine, my dear. I'm old now and I cough a bit when it's cold, but I'm used to it. Tell me about your flights. What do you see up there in the high skies?" I told her about the sunrises above the clouds, the cities glittering under nighttime lights, the passengers I carried all over the place. She listened, her eyes sparkling like a child's. Then I asked her, "Grandma, the $2,000 I send you every month, have you been receiving it all? I want to know if you have enough to spend, or should I send more? I know you're thrifty, but I want you to be more comfortable, to fix the roof, buy medicine when needed." She paused for a moment as if I had said something utterly strange. Then she shook her head lightly, smiling gently. "What money? I haven't received any money at all. But I'm managing just fine, don't worry. I'm used to living frugally. Vegetables from the garden, bread I bake myself. I don't need much." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I froze, the smile on my lips vanishing instantly. "What do you mean, Grandma? I've been sending it regularly for 2 years now. $2,000 each month through Dad's account. I thought Dad had transferred it to you." My head spun with questions. It couldn't be. I double-checked in my mind. Every month I transferred $5,000 to my dad Frank's account with a clear message. $3,000 for Mom and Dad, $2,000 for Grandma. Dad always replied, "Received, will take care of Grandma fully." I had never doubted it. I thought that money helped her fix the leaky roof, buy warm blankets, or even see a doctor when her joints ached. But now, sitting beside her, looking at the rundown house with the water-stained ceiling, the nearly empty fridge, I started to see that something was wrong. She still smiled, trying to reassure me. "Maybe you got something mixed up. I'm fine, Tyler. Just having you visit makes me happy." But I couldn't smile. My heart pounded, a vague anxiety beginning to creep in. Why hadn't she received it? What had Dad done with the money? I tried to stay calm, not wanting to worry her, but in my mind, dark thoughts started flooding in. We continued talking. She told me about the small garden behind the house, the flowers she planted, the kind neighbors who occasionally stopped by. But I was only half listening. My eyes scanned the house, the worn-out sofa, the rusty gas stove, the thin blanket on her bed. She had once been a kitchen assistant at the local high school, working hard her whole life to raise my dad after Grandpa passed away. And now, the monthly money I sent, she hadn't received a single cent? That night I lay on the old bed in the living room, the wind whistling through the door cracks, my mind full of restlessness. I picked up my phone and checked the transfer history again. The last one I sent was 2 weeks ago. Dad had received it and replied, "And thanks, son, we'll use it for the right purposes." What purposes? I started to suspect. Could Mom and Dad have kept it all? No, impossible. They're my parents. I shook my head, trying to chase away those thoughts. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Tomorrow I'd drive to Pinecrest Heights and ask Mom and Dad directly. But deep down, a fear was growing. If Grandma was right, then for the past 2 years she had been living in deprivation while I thought I was helping. I felt guilty, tormented. She had sacrificed her whole life for the family, and now, at this age, she deserved to be taken care of. I clenched my fist, determined to find out the truth. Early the next morning, as the sun just began to peek through the dense pine canopies in Flagstaff, I was already up. My grandmother was still sleeping, her steady breathing echoing from the next room. I didn't want to wake her, so I quietly brewed a cup of black coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the small garden. The yellowed leaves were falling scatteredly, as if reminding me of how quickly time passes. I thought about her, about the nights she sat alone by the fireplace, her trembling hands holding an old expense ledger. She had never complained, but now I realized that her silence was the real pain. I had to clarify everything for her sake and for my own conscience. I left a note on the table. "I'm going out for a bit. I'll be back with you tonight. Love you." Then I stepped out to the car, the engine starting smoothly in the chilly air. The road from Flagstaff to Pinecrest Heights only took about an hour to drive, but today it seemed endlessly long. I turned on the radio, but the cheerful pop music only made me more irritable. I switched it off, letting my mind wander through the thoughts. Why would my parents do that? Or was it really just a misunderstanding? I recalled the video calls with Dad. He always smiled and said, "Everything's fine, focus on your flying." And Mom would boast about new purchases. "I just got this beautiful bag, dear." At the time, I thought it was from Dad's business money, but now, the suspicion grew larger, like a snowball rolling downhill. Pinecrest Heights appeared before me, an upscale residential area with clean stone-paved streets and white fences surrounding spacious 2-story homes. Amid the lush green pines, it looked like a perfect picture of success. But to me, it always felt artificial and cold. My parents had moved here 10 years ago when Dad's business was booming. I parked in front of the gate, looking up at the second-floor window where Mom often sat scrolling on her phone. My heart beat faster, a mix of anxiety and anger surging. I took a deep breath, stepped up the porch, and rang the doorbell. My mom opened the door with a polite smile. My mom, Vivian Reed, 58 years old, looked younger than her age thanks to spa sessions and perfect makeup. She had once been a real estate broker, making a fortune from property deals. But now she was retired early to enjoy life. That meant she spent time pampering herself, shopping, and showing off on social media. "Tyler, you're back? Why didn't you let me know so I could prepare something for breakfast?" She hugged me superficially, the scent of expensive perfume lingering. "I have something urgent, Mom," I said, stepping inside. The familiar atmosphere hit me immediately, cold and distant. From childhood, I had felt this alienation. My parents were always busy with their own world. Dad with his used car dealership, Mom with her parties. They rarely asked about me, my flights, or my life in the skies. That distance had built up over many years from when I was a boy who often ran to Grandma's house for warmth. Now, stepping into the spacious living room with its shiny leather sofa and curved screen TV on the wall, I felt like a stranger again. Dad was sitting at the dining table reading a newspaper, an old habit in the digital age. My dad, Frank Reed, 61 years old, owned a used car dealership on the outskirts. His business was unsteady, sometimes profitable, sometimes not. but he always liked to present himself as a successful entrepreneur. He wore a checkered shirt, his hair neatly combed, a gold watch gleaming on his wrist. "Tyler, son, sit down, have breakfast with us," he said without looking up. I didn't sit. I stood there, clenching my fists, getting straight to the point. "Mom, Dad, I need to ask about the money I send every month. The $2,000 for Grandma. I just visited her and she said she hasn't received anything. Where did that money go?" As soon as I spoke, the room fell into silence. The ticking of the wall clock became crystal clear like a chaotic heartbeat. Dad lowered the newspaper slowly, the movement calculated. His face was a mix of surprise and annoyance, as if I had accused him of something terrible. He looked at me, eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about, Tyler?" "I've given the money to Grandma fully. Everything as you requested. You send $5,000 each month. I keep $3,000 for the family and transfer $2,000 to her. Why are you asking this?" I looked at him, trying to read his expression. There was something insincere in the way he spoke, too calm, too certain. My mom froze by the kitchen counter, her hand holding the coffee cup midway. A flicker of confusion crossed her face, her eyes blinking quickly, but she regained her composure immediately. Her lips pursed. She set the cup down, her voice soft but full of caution. "That's right, dear. Maybe Grandma just forgot. She's old. Her memory isn't as good anymore. She often gets confused about money matters. Don't overthink it and make everyone worry." Her words cut into my heart like a knife. Forgot? My grandmother wasn't like that. She remembered every small expense, meticulously noting them in her notebook. I stood there silently listening, a wave of doubt and disappointment rising. Every word they said sounded so smooth it was chilling, as if rehearsed. Dad nodded in agreement. "Exactly, you know, Grandma. Last time she even forgot Cameron's birthday. I've given it to her in person or transferred it. I don't remember exactly, but it definitely happened. Don't worry." I looked at them, trying to suppress my anger. "But she said she hasn't received anything. She's living in hardship, do you know that? The house is leaking, the fridge is empty, she coughs at night. If you've given it, why is she like this?" My voice rose, trembling with emotion. Mom shook her head, stepping closer, placing her hand on my shoulder. A rare gesture. "Dear, she's old and tends to exaggerate. I know she's thrifty, doesn't like spending. Maybe she stashed it somewhere and forgot. It's good that you visited her, but don't let her make you doubt the family." I brushed her hand away, gently but enough to startle her. I looked around the luxurious house. Expensive paintings on the walls, crystal vases sparkling under the chandelier. The garage outside with a brand new SUV. Every detail was like a silent accusation, in complete contrast to the image of Grandma Eleanor's rundown, impoverished home. The suspicion grew, but I didn't argue further. I understood that any explanation now would only cloud the truth more. They wouldn't admit it, at least not right now. "I understand," I said, my voice ice cold. "I'm going back to Grandma." Dad looked at me, a flicker of worry in his eyes, but then he shrugged. "All right, go ahead. Remember to send this month's money." His words felt like a slap, but I didn't respond. I turned my back, walked out the door, the cold wind rushing in as if to soothe the burning anger inside me. I slammed the car door shut, started the engine, and drove straight back to Flagstaff. The road wound through the pine forest, cold wind rushing through the cracked window, but it wasn't as cold as the disappointment gnawing at my heart. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind spinning. I remembered my childhood in the house in Pinecrest Heights, a home always filled with voices but lacking warmth. It was the 90s when I was just 6 or 7 years old. Our house wasn't as luxurious as it is now, but it already showed signs of artificiality. My father, a man of ambition, always throwing himself into work. To him, money and status were the only measures of success. He often came home late, reeking of beer and cigarette smoke on his clothes. "Sold 2 cars today, son," he would boast, but he never asked how school was or if I had any joys or sorrows. He saw me as part of the perfect family image, the eldest son, good at studies, not causing trouble. But he didn't know that I often sat alone in my room looking out the window, waiting for a hug or a genuine word of praise. As for my mother, Vivian, she was busy with her appearance and parties. She worked as a real estate broker, rushing around viewing houses and signing contracts. She was beautiful, always with meticulous makeup, wavy hair, and fashionable dresses. But she rarely gave me genuine concern. "Tyler, play by yourself, Mom's busy," she would say, then dive into phone calls with clients. In the evenings, she came home with bags full of fashion catalogs, sitting in front of the mirror for hours. I remember once when I fell off my bike, my knee bleeding, she just glanced over and said, "Wash it off, dear, don't dirty the floor." No hug, no questions. She devoted all her attention to parties with friends, wealthy women boasting about their homes and cars. I felt like a decorative item in her life, not her son. Then my younger brother Cameron was born, 4 years my junior. That's when everything changed completely. Cameron was rebellious from the start, crying incessantly, throwing things, demanding endlessly. But my parents spoiled him rotten. "He's the youngest," Mom would say, then buy him expensive toys while I had to save my own pocket money for books. Dad spent time teaching Cameron to ride a bike, while with me he just yelled, "Learn it yourself, you're grown up." Cameron often caused trouble at school, fighting, skipping classes, but my parents always defended him, blaming the teachers. But if my grades dropped even slightly, Dad would shout, "You want to embarrass me?" Their selfishness was evident. They gave all their love to Cameron because he was like them, showy, demanding. Me, quiet and dreamy, was pushed aside. In those childhood years, only my grandmother cared and raised me properly. While my parents were busy with Cameron, she took me in on weekends and summer breaks. Her house was simple, with the scent of damp wood and baked goods lingering. She taught me to cook, how to stir batter for cookies, how to plant vegetables in the garden. "Life isn't always easy, Tyler, but you need love to get through it," she said, stroking my hair. The memories with her were so vivid that I could feel that warmth again. Once I was bullied at school for being tall and skinny. At home, Mom just said, "Boys have to be tough." But when I told Grandma, she hugged me tight, tears rolling down her cheeks. "My grandson is so talented, don't listen to them. I'm proud of you." She told stories about Grandpa, how he overcame hardships in his youth. She taught me to read, adventure books about the sky, about airplanes. "You like flying, huh? I believe you'll do it." She was my only support, where I found unconditional love. While my parents were busy bragging to neighbors about our happy family, she quietly cared for me, from meals to stories that helped me grow. Then came the time I got accepted into the pilot training program when I was 18. It was my dream from childhood, to soar in the sky, free like a bird. I won a partial scholarship but needed money for the initial tuition. I nervously told my parents. Dad laughed mockingly. "A pilot? Tuition's high. Can you handle it yourself?" Mom shook her head. "I don't have extra money saving for Cameron's college." They refused outright, without a word of encouragement. I was devastated, thinking my dream was shattered. But Grandma, she called me to Flagstaff, sat by the fireplace holding her old savings book. "I have this for you. Take it for tuition." It was all the money she had saved her whole life from her kitchen assistant salary. She gave it all, over $10,000, enough for me to enroll and get through the tough first year. I remember that day clearly, the chilly Flagstaff air, as she saw me off at the small airport. Her eyes were proud, full of love, tears rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. "Fly high, grandson, I'll pray for you every day." She hugged me tight, the familiar scent of soap. That money wasn't just money, it was love, sacrifice. It helped me through the grueling early months. Test flights, theory classes, living away from home. Whenever I was tired, I thought of her, of that smile, and pushed harder. I've never forgotten. On every flight, I whisper, "Thank you, Grandma." Now, driving back to Flagstaff, those memories made my heart ache sharply. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying not to let the anger explode, but deep down, I knew I couldn't let it go. My grandmother, the woman who had sacrificed her entire life for me, didn't deserve to endure this. I decided to stay with her for the rest of my leave, not just for companionship, but also to personally investigate what was really going on. My short vacation was almost over, but I would make the most of every minute. Perhaps by staying with her, I would see more clearly the signs I had missed before because I was too busy with the skies. The first few days in Flagstaff were cold but strangely peaceful. Arizona's autumn was gradually turning to winter, the air crisp, pine needles falling scatteredly in the yard. Grandma Eleanor would wake up early, puttering around in the kitchen with familiar sounds, the clinking of pots and pans, the faint aroma of black coffee. She prepared simple breakfasts, usually toasted bread with butter accompanied by a few boiled eggs and some vegetables from the backyard garden. "Eat up, dear. A pilot needs to be strong to fly," she said, smiling kindly, her trembling hands placing the plate in front of me. I sat at the old wooden table, watching her move slowly but steadily, my heart feeling unusually warm. It had been a long time since I had mornings like this, without rushing to the airport, without worrying about a packed flight schedule. Just her and me, in the small house amid the pine forest. We spent time talking. I sat listening to her tell old stories, ones I had heard hundreds of times but never grew tired of. She talked about her youth, when she worked as a kitchen assistant at the local high school, cooking for hundreds of students each day. "I loved making cookies the most, dear. The kids would always ask for more, their faces so excited." She laughed, her eyes sparkling under the weak sunlight filtering through the window. Then she spoke of my grandfather, the gentle man who had passed away more than 20 years ago. "Your grandpa loved carving wood, making toys for you when you were little. Remember the wooden airplane he made for you?" I nodded, my heart stinging. I still kept that airplane in my suitcase, carrying it on every flight like a talisman. Those stories were like a gentle river, washing away some of the anxiety within me. We tidied up the small garden in the front yard together. Her garden had once been lush, but now only a few wilted vegetable bushes remained due to the cold season. I rolled up my sleeves, grabbed a hoe to dig the soil, and planted some more onions and spinach that she liked. "You're so handy," she praised, sitting on a small chair watching. I smiled. "It's because you taught me." Then I helped her replace the old awning on the porch. The awning had rotted from last year's rain and snow. I bought a few new boards from the local store, climbed a ladder, and hammered nails. The sound of the hammer echoed through the quiet pine forest, mingling with the whistling wind. She stood nearby, handing me water, her eyes full of love. In those moments, I felt a rare peace, as if all the hurts dissolved amid the warm scent of wood and the forest wind. My busy life in New York, the endless flights seemed so distant. Here it was just her and me, like in my childhood. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized she was living in heartbreaking deprivation. At first, I tried not to notice, thinking she was just used to being thrifty. But gradually, the small details accumulated, like drops of water overflowing a cup. The heating system in the house was outdated, humming noisily when turned on and only warming one corner of the room. In the first nights, I huddled under thin blankets, thinking about the modern fireplace at my parents' house. The gas stove was leaking, a faint gas smell lingering whenever she cooked, making me worry. "Grandma, the stove is broken. Let me get you a new one, okay?" I asked. She shook her head. "No need, dear. It's still working fine. Don't waste money on a new one." But I knew that if she didn't get a new one, it could be dangerous. Then the fridge, nearly empty. I opened it to check, seeing only a few eggs, dry crackers, and some wilted vegetables from the garden. No meat, no fresh milk, no fruit. She ate so sparingly that I had to hold back tears. "Is this all you eat?" I asked, my voice trembling. She laughed it off. "I'm old now, I eat little, dear. As long as I'm full, it's enough." But I saw she had grown thinner, her cheeks hollowed, her skin more wrinkled. Her clothes were worn out, the sweater she had knitted herself in her youth now patched and repatched. The blanket on her bed was thin, not warm enough for the upcoming winter. The woolen shoes she wore around the house had holes in the heels, exposing her cold toes. She still tried to maintain a calm demeanor, always saying, "I'm used to it, don't worry. I don't want to bother anyone." Her words cut into my heart like a knife. Bother anyone? She had sacrificed her whole life, and now she was afraid of being a burden? She lived frugally to the point of harshness. Every evening, she sat at the table under the dim yellow light, holding her old notebook and meticulously recording every expense. "Today, bread cost $2, vegetables $1, she murmured, her pencil trembling on the paper. She always feared spending too much would leave her short on medicine money. "Old age brings minor illnesses, dear. Got to save for when I'm sick," she said, her eyes distant. I sat beside her, watching, my heart full of sorrow. She had once been a strong woman, now calculating every cent to get through the day. When I asked about fixing the roof because it was leaky and let in water every time it rained or snowed, she just shook her head. "It'll hold up this winter, dear. Don't worry." But I couldn't stand seeing her live in such dilapidated conditions. On nights when the wind howled through the pine forest, I lay awake on the old bed in the living room, hearing her soft coughing from the next room. The dry, prolonged cough tore at my heart. I wanted to run over, hug her, ask if she was okay, but I was afraid of waking her. A feeling of helplessness and pity overwhelmed me like a rising wave. I thought about my flights, soaring high, free, but now I felt small and useless. Why hadn't I noticed sooner? For 2 years sending money regularly, I thought she was living comfortably, fixing the house, buying medicine. But in reality, she was living in such deprivation. Who had taken that money? My parents? Cameron? The suspicion grew larger, like a slow-burning bomb in my heart. After many sleepless nights, tossing and turning, I decided I had to verify it myself. My parents had lied, I was certain, but suspicion alone wasn't enough. I needed concrete evidence, something undeniable. I couldn't confront them directly anymore. They would be on guard, they would cover it up. I had to be sneaky, like a pilot flying low to avoid radar. The thought made my heart race, part fear, part excitement. I was a pilot used to being in control, but now I was embarking on a risky flight, where the destination was the dark truth about my own family. That evening, I decided to drop by my parents' house in Pinecrest Heights. Before going, I called Mom, pretending I wanted to have dinner with the family to clear up the misunderstanding. "Sure, come over, dear, I'll make grilled meat," she said over the phone, her voice cheerfully artificial. I drove to my parents' house, my heart pounding like before a flight in a storm. It felt like I was entering a place that was no longer the home of my childhood, but a cave full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. When I arrived, the house was as luxurious as ever. Chandeliers sparkling, the delicious smell of food wafting from the kitchen. Dad was sitting watching TV, a brand new curved screen I hadn't seen before. "Son, have a seat. Beer?" he asked, his tone friendly but his eyes not leaving the screen. Mom was bustling in the kitchen, wearing a new dress, her neck adorned with a glittering pearl necklace. My younger brother Cameron was scrolling on his phone, bragging about the new car he'd just bought. "Check this out, bro. A BMW X3 rides so smooth. Just got it 2 months ago." He grinned widely, showing me photos of the shiny car on his screen. I nodded, forcing a smile, but my heart was full of suspicion. Dinner that night was awkward. We ate grilled meat, salad, and French bread. When dinner ended, my parents were busy cleaning up and watching a movie. Cameron went out to the garage to tinker with his car, and I pretended to go to the bathroom before sneaking into Dad's office. The office was on the first floor, the door unlocked. Dad was always that confident. My heart was racing wildly, my hands ice cold, sweat breaking out despite the chill. I pushed the door open gently, stepping into the dim darkness. The desk was cluttered, full of papers, a sign of his unsteady business. I pulled open the first drawer and found a stack of bills and receipts for purchases and dining that hadn't been filed away yet. My heart leaped. This was it. I flipped through quickly. A receipt for a Rolex watch, $5,000. An invoice for a Louis Vuitton bag for Mom, $2,000. Designer dresses from Nordstrom, another $1,500. Then receipts for fancy dinners, $300, and car payments for Cameron installments. But the first payment, $4,000. The dates matched the times I sent money. I quickly snapped photos with my phone, my hands shaking, then stuffed the entire stack of papers into my coat pocket. Not all of them, just the important ones, so they wouldn't suspect right away. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, Dad's. I closed the drawer, dashed out of the room, my heart pounding like a drum. "What were you doing in there?" Dad asked when he saw me. I forced a smile. "Just looking for an old notebook, Dad." He nodded, not pressing further. I said goodbye and drove back to Flagstaff in the darkness, my coat pocket heavy. The road was pitch black, lit only by my headlights, but my mind was gradually clearing. This was the first piece of evidence. Back at Grandma's house, she was already asleep, her soft coughing echoing from the room. I sat at the table, opened my laptop, and cross-referenced with my bank statements. Every time I transferred $5,000, just a few days later, the shopping bills appeared. On the 8th, the watch. On the 10th, the bag. Last month, transfer on the 3rd, then on the 7th, the car receipt for Cameron. Everything fit together like a puzzle. The $2,000 for Grandma? No trace. They kept it all, used it for themselves. I stared at the screen, feeling like someone had stabbed me hard in the chest. Tears rolled down, blurring the numbers. How could they do this? Grandma was Dad's mother, the one who raised him. And me, their son, sending money home in the hope of helping the family. But they betrayed us, using that money for their lavish lifestyle. Everything I had gathered made it all crystal clear. From the bank statements, receipts, payment invoices to social media posts, it all said the same thing. The money I sent for Grandma had been misappropriated, used for my parents' and brother's extravagant lifestyle. It wasn't random. This was systematic, month after month. That night in the small house in Flagstaff, I compiled all the evidence. Sitting by the weak fireplace, the wind howling outside the window, I printed out the invoices, pasted them into a notebook, and annotated the dates. In total, over the past 2 years, I had sent nearly $50,000 for Grandma, but she hadn't received a single cent. My heart ached sharply, anger mixed with sadness. I thought about Grandma sleeping in the next room, coughing from the cold, and tears fell again. But now I had enough evidence. Christmas was coming up, the big family gathering, and that would be the day everything came to light. I wasn't afraid anymore, just determined. They would have to face it, and Grandma would get justice. The days that followed passed in anxious anticipation. My vacation ended and I had to fly back to work, but my mind was restless. On every flight from New York to Los Angeles, I sat in the cockpit looking down at the vast white clouds, but my thoughts were only on Flagstaff, on my grandmother, and on the file of documents safely tucked away in my suitcase. I called her every day to check on her health and sent more money, this time through the elderly neighbor who lived nearby, not through Dad anymore. My parents called a few times, their voices cheerful as if nothing had happened. "Let's make Christmas big this year, come home." I agreed, but in my heart a plan was forming. I would come, bringing the truth with me. Christmas that year arrived faster than I expected. Arizona was bitterly cold, with light snow falling in Flagstaff. The Reed house was decorated lavishly, a towering Christmas tree with twinkling LED lights, wreaths hanging on the doors, Christmas music echoing from outdoor speakers. My parents hosted a big party, as they did every year, inviting relatives, friends, and neighbors. The atmosphere was festive, filled with well wishes. Everyone laughed and chatted, raising glasses of wine, children running around opening gifts. My parents were at the center. Dad Frank in a red suit laughing heartily as he told stories about his business. Mom Vivian in a sparkling dress boasting about her recent spa trip. My younger brother Cameron was bustling about showing off his new BMW to our cousins. I arrived a bit late with Grandma Eleanor. I drove to pick her up from Flagstaff. She wore her old knitted sweater holding a small bag of gifts, the cookies she had baked herself. I didn't really want to go, dear. But it's Christmas, she said softly on the way. I squeezed her hand. I'm here with you. When we stepped into the villa, the warm air enveloped us, but to me it felt nauseatingly artificial. Relatives greeted us, hugging Grandma and asking after her, but I saw pity flash in their eyes as they looked at her. The elderly woman in worn clothes amid the glamorous outfits. I sat silently beside her throughout, holding her hand under the table, observing my parents laughing and talking. Dad slapped an uncle on the shoulder, boasting about his once thriving car dealership. Mom smiled radiantly, talking about her new handbag. It's designer, not cheap at all. Cameron was taking selfies with the tree, posting them on social media. I sat there, my heart burning, my hand gripping the file in my coat pocket. I had prepared for what was coming, a bomb in the middle of the party. The party was in full swing, everyone seated around the long dining table with roasted turkey, salad, and pudding being served. Laughter echoed, glasses clinking. Frank, in high spirits, stood up, raising a toast with a relative. This year our family has been so successful. New cars, beautiful house, life is perfect. He laughed loudly, his face flushed from the wine. That was the moment I had been waiting for. My heart pounded like an airplane engine before takeoff. I stood up, holding the thick file, and placed it on the table with a soft but noticeable thud. The atmosphere suddenly fell silent. The Christmas music still played, but the laughter died instantly. Everyone was surprised, staring at me in confusion. Uncle Tom paused his glass midway. Aunt Mary gaped. Grandma beside me squeezed my hand tightly, her eyes worried but silent. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling but resolute. Everyone, listen to me for a moment. Christmas is a time for family reunion, but today I have to reveal the truth, a painful truth. The room was deathly quiet, only the wind outside the window audible. I looked around and saw my parents frozen. Dad Frank's face turning red, Mom Vivian pursing her lips. Cameron frowned, not understanding. I continued, my voice louder. For the past 2 years, I've been sending $5,000 every month. $3,000 for Mom and Dad, $2,000 for Grandma. I thought that money helped her live comfortably, fix the house, buy medicine. But she hasn't received a single cent. She's been living in hardship in Flagstaff. Leaky roof, empty fridge, coughing at night from the cold. Meanwhile, I paused, gesturing around. This house is luxurious, new cars, designer watches, expensive handbags. Where does this extravagant lifestyle come from? People started murmuring, the whispers spreading. What? Money sent home? I pointed to the file. In here is all the evidence. My bank statements, shopping receipts, payment invoices, social media posts. Every time I transferred money, just a few days later, Mom, Dad, and Cameron used it all on luxuries. The $2,000 for Grandma? Gone. They misappropriated everything. I opened the file, flipping to the first page. Dad's Rolex receipt, dates matching my transfer. Here. Dad bought this right after I sent the October money. Then the next page. Mom's handbag invoice. Mom posted this on social media, but where did the money come from? And Cameron's car photo. My brother bragged about his BMW, but the first installment matches the day I sent. The relatives murmured louder, the chatter spreading like wildfire. Uncle Tom looked at Dad, eyes full of doubt. Aunt Mary covered her mouth, whispering to her husband, "Oh my God, how could this be?" Frank tried to stay calm, his face paling, but his hands shook as he saw his name on the invoices. He jumped up, his voice stammering, "What? What are you doing, Tyler? This is Christmas. Why are you ruining it like this? He snatched the file from my hand, flipping through quickly, his face turning ashen. Then he threw it down on the table, yelling, "Lies! You're making this up to humiliate your parents. We gave the money to Grandma. Right, Vivian?" Mom paled, forcing a smile, her voice quivering. Yes, dear. It's just a misunderstanding. Grandma forgot, that's all." But her smile was twisted, her eyes panicked. Cameron hung his head, unable to believe his own posts were exposing the family. He muttered, "No, it's not like that, bro." But everyone had seen the car photo on the phone screen I held up, matching the receipt. The atmosphere turned chaotic, relatives whispering louder, some standing up, looking at my parents with disappointment. Uncle Tom shook his head. "Frank, if this is true, how could you do that to your own mother?" Dad exploded in anger, his face purple. "Shut up. This is my house. I didn't do anything wrong." "Tyler, you're a traitor." He pointed at me, his voice shrill. But I stood firm, my heart pounding but unwavering. I had prepared for this, for the rage, the denial. Amid the chaos, Grandma Eleanor slowly stood up. The room fell deathly silent once more. She walked toward the table, her eyes a mix of indignation and pain, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "In all my life, I've never seen anything so shameful. When a child can take away money meant for his mother to feed his own pretense and vanity." She looked straight at Dad, her son. "Frank, you are my son, but you've disappointed me. The money Tyler sent for me, you kept it for shopping. I lived in deprivation, but you lived in luxury. I don't need the money, but I need honesty from my children." Her words cut like a knife. The room was utterly still. Dad stood frozen, his face pale, mouth open but speechless. Mom collapsed into her chair, crying and shaking her head. I don't understand." Cameron shrank into a corner, panicked and ashamed, his face flushed. No one said a word. Relatives exchanged glances, the festive mood shattered. I stepped over, gently helping Grandma leave. She said nothing more, just held my hand tightly, her eyes filled with deep sadness. We walked out the door, light snow falling outside, the cold wind whipping our faces. On the way back to Flagstaff, she cried softly, "I never expected this, dear." I hugged her. "I'm sorry, Grandma, but I had to do it." She nodded. "I'm proud of you." That night, back at the small house, she slept peacefully, but I stayed awake all night. The truth had been revealed, but the wounds remained. Relatives called afterward to check in, but my parents were silent. I knew everything had changed forever. The morning after, Christmas had passed, but the festive atmosphere still lingered in the chilly air of Flagstaff. I woke up early, brewed black coffee, and sat at the old wooden table looking out at the garden covered in a thin layer of snow. Grandma was still sleeping, her steady breathing from the next room reminding me of why I had done it all. Last night, after bringing her home, I sat quietly by the fireplace, replaying the chaotic scene at the villa. Dad yelling loudly, Mom sobbing, Cameron hanging his head. Relatives whispering, their eyes full of disappointment. Uncle Tom called me afterward. "Tyler, if what you said is true, then—" I don't know what to say. You did the right thing. Calls from other relatives came too, checking in, expressing shock. But from my parents and Cameron, absolute silence. Not a single call, not a message. As if they were trying to bury everything under the Christmas snow. I couldn't wait for them to regret it on their own. The truth had been revealed, but the money that belonged to Grandma, still hadn't been returned. I decided to act immediately. Sitting in front of my laptop, I drafted a concise letter as cold as the winter wind. "Dear Mom and Dad," I wrote, my hands slightly trembling from the lingering anger. "Following what happened last night, I am enclosing copies of the evidence regarding your misappropriation of the money I sent for Grandma, totaling nearly $50,000 over 2 years. If within the next 30 days you do not repay the full amount, I will file a lawsuit in the local court." This is not a threat, but justice for her. I printed it out, attached copies of the receipts, bank statements, social media post photos, everything I had gathered. I stuffed it all into an envelope, sealed it, and drove to the post office to send it via express mail to Pinecrest Heights. On the way back, my heart raced. I never thought I'd dare go this far, suing my own parents. But thinking of Grandma, of the night she coughed from the cold, I knew I had no choice. This was the only way to reclaim what was hers and perhaps regain a bit of dignity for myself. I imagined their reaction when they received the letter. Maybe Dad would open the envelope irritably, thinking it was a business bill. Then his face would pale as he read the lines. Mom would cover her mouth, tears rolling down, shaking her head. Tyler, how dare he? They never expected their son, the one who always stayed silent, always sent money without questions, to go this far. The family reputation, which they valued above all else, was on the brink of collapse. Relatives knew, friends whispered, neighbors would surely gossip. Dad's car dealership, already unstable, would lose customers if the scandal spread. Mom, with her boastful social media posts, would face critical comments. I didn't take joy in that, only felt sad. Sad that my family had crumbled to this point, that greed had turned them into strangers. In the days that followed, I stayed with Grandma, trying to keep things normal. We cleaned the house, fixed the awning, planted more vegetables for spring. She spoke less, her eyes distant whenever she thought of her son. "I'm not angry at Frank, dear. Just sad," she said once as we sat by the fireplace. I hugged her. "I know, Grandma, but I had to do this." She nodded, stroking my hair like when I was a child. But inside me was a storm. I checked my phone every hour, waiting for word from them. Nothing. Only calls from relatives. Aunt Mary checking on Grandma, Uncle Tom advising patience. "Frank's stubborn, but he'll think it over." I smiled bitterly. "I hope so, Uncle." But deep down, I knew they wouldn't apologize. Dad's pride, Mom's artificiality, they were greater than family ties. Then, as predicted, they acted. Not with apologies, but with money. I learned through a call from Uncle Tom. "Frank's scrambling for money, Tyler. He sold Cameron's car and Vivian's watch and handbag, even mortgaging the house." I was stunned. The misappropriated amount was nearly $50,000, precisely $48,000, but with interest and losses, I demanded the full sum. Dad, Frank hustled everywhere, calling friends to borrow, selling items online, even going to the bank to mortgage the spacious house in Pinecrest Heights. I imagined the scene, Dad sitting in the garage watching the shiny SUV being towed away, his face full of bitterness. Mom crying as she packed her Louis Vuitton handbag, designer dresses, the things she once bragged about, to sell at a discount. Cameron arguing, losing his beloved BMW, but ultimately having to accept it. They had no choice. A lawsuit would make everything public, their reputation crumbling completely. They were panicked, not out of remorse, but out of fear of losing face. Finally, after 2 weeks, they came. I received a brief message from Dad. "We'll meet at Grandma's this afternoon." I prepared, sitting at the kitchen table with Grandma, my heart racing. She trembled. "I don't want to see them, dear." But I convinced her, "We have to end this, Grandma." When the old car, probably the one left after the sales, pulled up at the door, cold wind rushed into the house. Dad and Mom stepped in, their faces stiff, avoiding our eyes. Dad Frank, once arrogant, now looked older, his hair disheveled, eyes dark-circled. Mom Vivian without makeup, in simple clothes, her eyes red and swollen. They didn't greet us, just stood there like strangers. Grandma sat silently in the corner, her hands clasped tightly. Dad placed a thick envelope on the table, the rustling of paper echoing in the silence. "Here's the money. Exactly $48,000. You can count it if you don't trust me." His voice was ice cold, without an apology. I looked at the envelope, unmoving. "I don't need to count it." "But do you know what this is?" I asked, my voice calm but my heart surging. Dad looked at me, his eyes full of pride and bitterness. I'm paying it back not because I'm afraid of a lawsuit, but to end all ties. From now on, you and Grandma are no longer family to me. His words cut like a knife. Disowning us? Considering us no longer family? Mom added, her voice trembling. That's right, Tyler. We never expected you to make things this bad. She avoided looking at Grandma, her mother-in-law, as if Grandma were a stranger. Grandma Eleanor sat silently, her eyes glistening with tears, but she didn't cry. I squeezed her hand under the table, a vast emptiness overwhelming me. No anger, no resentment, just an immense void. I had hoped for an apology, a hug, but now there was only coldness. You think that's the end of it? I asked softly. Dad shrugged. It's over. Don't contact us anymore. They turned their backs, leaving without hesitation or regret. The door slammed shut, the sound of the car engine fading into the cold wind. Grandma cried softly, her shoulders shaking. I hugged her tightly. Grandma, I'm sorry. But from now on, I'll take better care of you. I promise. She wiped her tears, smiling weakly. Thank you, Tyler. I'm grateful to have a grandson like you. Without you, I don't know what I'd do. Her words soothed some of the pain in me. That night, sitting by the fireplace, I looked at the envelope of money, my heart full of torment. The money was back, but the family was lost forever. I thought about old memories. The artificial Christmases, parents showing off, Grandma quietly sending cookies. Now they had disowned us, as if erasing the past. But I didn't regret it. Grandma slept peacefully in the next room, her coughing less frequent, as if a weight had lifted. I promised myself I'd fix the house, buy medicine, care for her until the end. The truth hurt, but it brought freedom. Relatives called, supporting me. You did the right thing. But my parents, eternal silence. Everything had changed, but I was stronger. The days that followed seemed more peaceful in Flagstaff, but beneath the surface, waves of unrest still stirred in my heart. I used the money carefully. First, to repair the leaky roof and install a new heating system so Grandma wouldn't have to huddle under thin blankets on those freezing winter nights. I called workers from the nearby town and supervised them as they nailed new boards and repainted the ceiling. The sound of hammers echoed through the pine forest, mingling with the whistling wind, like a symphony of revival. But while we began to heal, the consequences for my parents and Cameron were gradually unfolding like a slow but devastating storm. I learned about it through calls from relatives, Uncle Tom, Aunt Mary, those who still kept in touch with me and Grandma. Frank and Vivian. They're in real trouble, Tyler, Uncle Tom said over the phone, his voice full of regret. Their reputation collapsed completely after that Christmas night. Relatives cut off contact. No more New Year's calls. Family gatherings canceled. Aunt Mary, Mom's sister, who had once been so close, now only sent brief messages. I can't believe my sister would do that. I'm sorry, dear. Friends turned away. Those who used to come to parties now avoided them, gossiping behind their backs about the Reed family scamming their own child. Mom Vivian, who loved boasting on social media, had to delete all her posts, but it was too late. Critical comments spread everywhere. Living lavishly on your mother-in-law's money? She deactivated her account and lived in silence, but the shame haunted her like a ghost. Dad's company, the used car dealership, already struggling, now lost all credibility. Old customers heard the rumors and turned away, not buying from someone who cheats his own mother. Revenue plummeted disastrously, and just a few months later, Dad was forced to close. I imagined the scene. Dad sitting in the empty office, papers scattered, watching the Reed Auto sign being taken down. He had once been so proud of that dealership, seeing it as a symbol of success, but now it crumbled like its artificial facade. Uncle Tom said, Frank's aged noticeably, dear. He's drinking more, talking less. And Mom? She who had retired early to enjoy life now had to take odd jobs, working as a cashier at the local supermarket. But people's eyes looked at her with pity. They lived in fear, avoiding neighbors, their doors always shut tight. Then the luxurious house in Pinecrest Heights, the symbol of their artificiality, was foreclosed by the bank, because they had mortgaged it to scrape together the money to pay me back. But with the business collapsing, they couldn't repay the debt. I learned through a call from Aunt Mary. The bank sent a truck, hauled away all the furniture. Vivian fainted from crying. Frank just stood there watching. They moved to a small house on the outskirts, a cheap residential area with bumpy dirt roads, far from the lush pine forests. The house was simple, with a tin roof and peeling plaster walls, completely opposite to their previous spacious home. They lived reclusively, avoiding everyone, windows always curtained, rarely going out except when necessary. Dad drank more heavily. Mom often sat alone crying. Cameron, my younger brother, couldn't handle the pressure. He left town just a few weeks later, carrying guilt and belated regret. He went to California looking for new work, Uncle Tom said. He said he's too ashamed to face anyone. I thought about Cameron. Once rebellious and demanding, now perhaps wandering in a strange city, his BMW sold, left only with the torment of those boastful posts that had become evidence against himself. Meanwhile, life for me and Grandma in Flagstaff gradually settled into a new rhythm, simple but unusually warm. The old rundown house was now more comfortable, a sturdy roof, the heating system humming warmly through the night, a new gas stove without leaks. I spent my leave time coming back, but even when flying, I always thought of her. In the mornings, she woke early to brew black coffee, its aroma filling the house. I tidied the porch, swept fallen pine needles, fixed the wooden fence. "You're just like your grandpa, so handy," she praised, sitting on a small chair watching. We had breakfast together. Toasted bread, boiled eggs, fresh vegetables from the garden. She told old stories about her youth as a cook, about Grandpa carving wood. I listened, laughed, my heart finding rare peace. Those moments were like healing medicine. No more suspicion, no more anger, just genuine love. In the evenings, we sat by the fireplace, listening to the forest wind whistling outside the window. She held her old notebook, recording expenses, but now she smiled more. "With you, I don't worry about shortages anymore." I told her about my flights, sunrises above the clouds, cities glittering under nighttime lights. She listened, her eyes sparkling. "You fly so high, I'm proud." On those nights, her coughing lessened, her sleep more peaceful. I bought her medicine, new clothes, warm sweaters, shoes without holes in the heels. She tried them on, laughing. "I feel young again." Life was simple, no parties, no showing off, just the two of us together amid the quiet pine forest. I replanted the garden, spinach greens lush, chrysanthemums blooming vibrantly. The scent of damp earth, birds chirping in the morning, all reminding me that true happiness lies in the small things. Tyler continued his flying job with a packed schedule from New York to Los Angeles, looping back to Miami. But whenever he had leave, even short ones, he flew back to Flagstaff. He brought small gifts, books she liked, chocolate from big cities, or a warm scarf. "You bring the whole world to me," she laughed, hugging him tightly. Those visits were a source of life. He helped her clean the house, cook, and walk in the pine forest together. She grew weaker with age, her steps slower, her hands more trembling, but her smile remained kind, her eyes full of love. "I've lived this long thanks to you," she said once, as we sat on the porch watching the snow fall. I shook my head. "No, Grandma, it's thanks to you. You taught me what real love is." Every wound in my heart gradually healed. The pain from my parents, from the betrayal, lingered like old scars, but no longer throbbed. I felt at peace because I had finally protected the one I loved most. Grandma Eleanor grew frailer, but she was happy, and that was everything. Time passed. Spring came to Flagstaff with flowers blooming profusely in the garden. I flew less, requesting a more flexible schedule to come back more often. Grandma and I had afternoons sitting reading books. She told stories of Grandpa. I shared about quirky passengers on the plane. Once there was an old lady like you afraid of flying. I had to comfort her, I recounted, and she laughed. You're so kind-hearted. Life had no more drama, no more suspicion, just peace. Years passed like that, in the simple peace of Flagstaff. My life gradually became more stable. The flights were no longer a burden but a familiar part, helping me balance between the sky and the ground. I still flew continuously from bustling cities with glaring neon lights to serene rural areas, but my heart always turned toward the small wooden house amid the pine forest. Grandma was now over 80, her health noticeably declining. She often forgot things. Her steps were slow, but her spirit remained strong. We lived together like two old friends, sharing old stories and small joys. I continued fixing up the house, installing a new fridge, buying a washing machine so she wouldn't have to wash by hand in cold water, even planting a few more apple trees in the garden for her to pick fruit in the fall. You're making me feel like a queen, she laughed softly, but I knew she deserved so much more. Then, unexpectedly, life brought me a surprise. A woman entered my world, gently like a breeze through the pine forest. It was a few years after that fateful Christmas when I was 35. I met her, Samantha, at the local airport in Phoenix, where I often landed domestic flights before driving to Flagstaff. Samantha worked as a nurse at the airport's medical room, a kind girl with long brown hair tied in a ponytail, gentle blue eyes, and a warm smile. The first time we met, I had lightly twisted my ankle while rushing to the boarding gate after a delayed flight. She bandaged it for me, her voice soft. You have to be careful. If a pilot falls, who's going to fly the plane? I laughed, feeling a lightness in my heart for the first time in years. We chatted briefly about flights, about night shifts at the airport, about busy but lonely lives. Subsequent meetings were coincidental at first, but gradually became familiar. I often stopped by the medical room for cold medicine or just to say hello. Samantha shared about herself. She was 28, grew up in Arizona, had gone through a short failed marriage that left deep scars. I used to think love was a fairy tale, but life isn't like that, she said once, as we sat drinking coffee at a small cafe near the airport. I shared about myself, about Grandma, about my family's betrayal, about the sleepless nights of torment. I lost faith too, but Grandma taught me that true love is patient and sacrificial. We found in each other a peace after so many hurts, like two lost puzzle pieces finally fitting together. Samantha understood the loneliness of a pilot, the endless trips away from home, and I found in her the gentleness I had lacked since childhood, from the days of my parents' indifference. Our relationship developed slowly but steadily. Late-night calls after flights, short dates in Phoenix, walks in the park, simple dinners, sharing life stories. Samantha loved Flagstaff from the first time I brought her to visit Grandma. This place is so peaceful, like a dream, she said as we strolled through the pine forest hand in hand. Grandma liked Samantha immediately. She's kind, like I was back in the day, she whispered to me. Samantha cared for Grandma like a daughter, checking her blood pressure, reminding her to take medicine, even cooking light meals for her. I feel like she's my own mother, Samantha confessed once, her eyes sparkling. I knew I had found the woman of my life, not for her appearance or glamour, but for her heart, for the way she filled the void in me. When I decided to get married, everything happened naturally, like the flow of forest wind. We didn't want a grand wedding, just simple and meaningful. I proposed to Samantha during a walk in the pine forest under an ancient tree canopy, kneeling with a simple ring I bought from New York. You're my peace, Samantha. Will you be my wife? She cried, nodding. Yes, my love. The wedding was held right in the backyard garden of Grandma Eleanor's house in Flagstaff. On a warm spring afternoon, the garden was now lush green. Chrysanthemums blooming vibrantly, spinach fresh and thriving, young leaves on the apple trees. We set up a small white tent, rustic wooden tables and chairs, decorated with wildflowers picked from the forest. The atmosphere was simple with only about 20 guests. My close friends from the airline, a few of Samantha's colleagues from the airport, and kind neighbors from Flagstaff. Grandma Eleanor was the only family member present. No parents, no brother Cameron. I had sent them invitations, a final gesture, though I knew they wouldn't come. My parents, now living in isolation on the outskirts, didn't respond. Cameron, wandering in California, only sent a short message. "Congrats, bro." I no longer cared. The wounds had healed, but the distance was too great. Grandma sat in the front row, wearing the new sweater I bought her, her silver-white hair under the spring sun. She smiled happily as I exchanged rings with Samantha, tears rolling down her cheeks. My grandson is all grown up now with a kind wife. The ceremony was brief. Vows under the tree canopy, friends' laughter, homemade cake. Grandma stood up, trembling, and hugged us. "I wish you two happiness. I've been waiting for this day for so long." In that moment, the Flagstaff garden felt like paradise, the breeze carrying the scent of flowers, birds singing, and my heart overflowing with love. Married life began smoothly. Samantha moved to Flagstaff with me and Grandma, working as a nurse at the local hospital. We lived in the old house, now filled with her laughter. In the mornings, Samantha brewed tea for Grandma. I fixed the car. In the evenings, the three of us sat by the fireplace telling stories. Samantha learned to bake cookies from Grandma, and Grandma treated her like a daughter. My daughter-in-law is so skillful. I flew less, requesting a flexible schedule to stay home more. On trips, I brought gifts for both, chocolate for Grandma, flowers for Samantha. Life was peaceful but truly happy, no shadows of the past haunting us. A few months after the wedding, Grandma's health declined further. That summer, she was often tired, ate less, rested more. I took her to the doctor. They said it was old age, a weak heart, but no pain. "I've lived a long life, dear," she smiled. But I saw her growing thinner, her skin more wrinkled. We cared for her more attentively. Samantha checked her blood pressure daily. I massaged her feet, told stories to cheer her up. She still smiled, still shared old tales. About Grandpa, about my childhood. I'm so happy with my grandson and daughter-in-law by my side. But in the fall, she weakened significantly. Walking was difficult. She slept fitfully. I canceled flights, stayed home full-time. Those nights I sat by her bed holding her hand, my heart full of worry. "Don't leave me, Grandma," I whispered. She stroked my hair. "If I go, you still have Samantha. Live well." That winter, with heavy snow in Flagstaff, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. It was a night of howling wind, the fireplace warm. I woke early, brewed coffee, went to her room to call her, but she lay still. A faint smile on her lips, her hand clutching the wedding photo on the bedside table. The small framed picture of the three of us, her face radiant. My heart skipped a beat, tears streaming down. I sat silently by the bed, holding her hand until the last moment, feeling like the world had collapsed. "Grandma," I cried, hugging her cold body. Samantha rushed in, crying too, hugging me. "Honey, she's gone." We sat there for hours in painful silence, snow falling outside the window like a farewell. I organized a simple funeral at the local church in Flagstaff, where she had attended services weekly. The church was small, wooden, its bells echoing through the pine forest. I notified my parents and Cameron by letter, a final gesture, though I knew they wouldn't come. And they didn't. No messages, no flowers. I no longer cared. The pain from them had faded, leaving only regret for Grandma. The funeral had distant relatives, friends, neighbors. Uncle Tom came, hugging me. "She was the best person, dear." Samantha stood by, squeezing my hand. We sang hymns, shared stories about her, the woman who sacrificed her whole life, the kind cook, the loving grandmother. As the church bells rang long and lingering in the cold wind, I felt my heart had lost its last loved one, but also relief, because she departed in peace, no longer suffering. She had lived happily in her final years with her grandson and daughter-in-law. No more deprivation or loneliness. After the funeral, we returned home. The garden was still green but missing her. Samantha hugged me. "Are you okay?" I nodded. Yes, because she went peacefully. We carried on, but the house felt emptier. I flew again, but my heart was in Flagstaff. Samantha was pregnant. New life began. I thought of Grandma. "Grandma, I'll tell our child about you." The wounds healed, leaving only love. My story, Tyler Reed, concludes in the quiet of the small house in Flagstaff. A place that once witnessed pain, betrayal, and the final sincere love between grandmother and grandson. That old wooden house still stands firm amid the pine forest, the roof repaired, the vegetable garden lush green, but the atmosphere is more silent than ever. Those losses taught me to understand that family isn't measured by blood ties, but by honesty and kindness. I once thought family was forever, an unbreakable bond of flesh and blood. But after everything, I realized that blood ties are just a fragile thread, easily broken without genuine sincerity. My parents, my own flesh and blood, betrayed us. Taking the money I sent for Grandma to live lavishly, leaving her in deprivation. They disowned me and her, treating us as if we no longer existed, all because of their pride and greed. Yet Grandma, though only my grandmother, gave me love greater than anyone else's. She sacrificed her life savings for me to train as a pilot, hugged me on lonely nights, and taught me to live uprightly. Relatives can betray, but true love can still exist. Sometimes from the only person left. Like Samantha, my wife, not blood-related, but she's my solid support. When Samantha was pregnant, I sat beside her on late nights, hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick, and thought, this is a new family, not by blood, but by choice. I told Samantha about Grandma, about the lessons, and she listened, her eyes sparkling. You were lucky to have her, and I'm lucky to have you. Those moments made me excited, like waiting for a new flight, full of hope, but also anxiety about the future. Grandma Eleanor passed away, but left me the most precious legacy, her character. She didn't leave gold or silver, just an old house and memories, but the character she taught me is greater than anything. Thanks to her, I learned that the truth sometimes causes loss, but silence in the face of wrong is the greatest loss. The story also reminds us that greed and deceit may bring temporary benefits, but sooner or later, they will be exposed. No reputation is big enough to cover a wrongdoing. Time is a fair judge, revealing everything. Sometimes I think about my parents. I no longer hate them, only feel pity. What is that temporary gain worth compared to peace? Samantha agrees. Greed is like fire, it burns itself. I nod, my heart full of reflection, like a flight through a storm, nerve-wracking but ultimately safe. In the end, after losing everything, I still have what my parents could never keep: peace. I understand that forgiveness isn't forgetting, but moving on without letting the pain turn you into someone like them. I once lost my blood family, lost Grandma, the last loved one, but my heart is at peace. No more torment about the past, no more anger. Forgiving my parents, not forgetting the betrayal, but not letting it control me. I live on, soaring in flights beside Samantha, waiting for our child to be born. Have you forgiven them? Samantha asked once. I smiled. Yes, for peace. That peace is like the wind in Flagstaff's forest, fleeting but refreshing. Unlike my parents, forever sunk in bitterness, I choose forgiveness to avoid becoming them. Selfish, deceitful. From that story, the lesson imparted is, cherish those who are sincere, who dare to love and stand for what's right, even if it leaves you alone. Because sometimes loneliness in truth is worth more than living amid deceit. My grandmother is proof. She was lonely after Grandpa's death, but still loved sincerely, standing for justice when she publicly expressed indignation at her own son. I followed her, alone when confronting my family, but truthful. Now with Samantha and our child, I cherish people like that. Life may make you lonely, but truth will bring peace. Let's tell our child this lesson. I whispered to Samantha's belly. She smiled. I'll tell it with you. The story ends, but the lesson lives on, like Flagstaff's pine forest, steadfast through every season.